Feel free to come by or call me. I mean, I do pretty well with the face-to-face or over the phone. I don't do real well with email or text. And
we can vouch for
yeah, I'm a little bit of a dinosaur, but I'm a dinosaur that's hanging on. So, but with that, and just with the board and manager protocols, I think I just roll this out for y'all to have a copy of a draft. It's a starting point. It needs some work. But we will probably have to end up having some kind of special work session to dig into that and probably a few other things. And the reason, and you may wonder, well, why are you bringing this forward? Well, this was one of the objectives in your strategic initiatives that we said we were going to do, just like with the personnel policy. That was supposed to come forward to the board, which it is. A board manager protocol is coming forward to the board. A communications policy, a social media policy. So that's the reason the strategic initiatives and the goals that are associated with that are so important, because that tells staff what we need to be working on during the course of the year. And you heard from Jim Prosser, that needs to be, I think we did a pretty good job keeping it manageable for this current year. Hopefully we'll get to most everything that we said we would get to. But that's for this coming year and really beyond, that's important to me as staff, so we know what we need to be working on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Wendy, and you can dig into the personnel policy. And I'm just going to say one thing. So personnel policy versus personnel ordinance. From a legal perspective, management likes to have personnel policy because it gives everybody more flexibility, and it minimizes legal risk. An ordinance adopted by the board says you have to follow A, B, C, and D. And that's not to say we don't follow A, B, C, and D with a policy, but if for some reason we were to slip up, there's not the same legal risk in not abiding by something in a policy versus an ordinance. So the trend is for organizations, municipalities, and counties to go towards a personnel policy versus a personnel ordinance, which is more like law. Does that make sense? I think that at the end of the day, they both function the same way, but the legal risk is less with the personnel
We've
policy.
always had a policy.
And the town has already had it, so you've been ahead of the game
Always
there.
had a policy,
Yeah.
as far as I know. So I've actually updated these in case you might want to take a look at the version that is basically the same as what you have, just some corrections, minor corrections. You can still do that. It's not that different.
Okay.
It won't take very long. I think that you guys are already moving toward the direction that I actually drew the presentation towards. And I'll give you a brief history. This current policy, as it says on the front page, was adopted September 11, 2007 and amended on December 11, 2007. I don't know what that amendment was. That was pre-me, and I wasn't involved, and I don't see any records anywhere. So, but I wanted you to notice that statement at the bottom, because we're bringing a new format to you, and I want you to understand the importance of this is what is on there now, and that is what will be on there as we move forward. You still have the same authority. So we revised the personnel policy in 2010, 2012, and 2014, and for whatever various reasons we didn't get them through. We're moving forward, and as we were talking today, we're adopting a new organizational culture change. So I brought this forward as they actually did this in Hickory in this format, and we liked it. I talked with the department heads; they all liked it. So what we've done is prepared what I call new and improved policy format, and it includes, it's basically high level overall. It just doesn't have the the particular policies broken down. Administrative policies are not broken down. If you look at that is all high level stuff. You would approve that at an operational level and not have to deal with administrative daily implementation of it. Town manager's role in this kind of format, same thing it is now, oversees the administration and revisions as they are needed. I'm sure he has input by what we call our leadership team. he would be able to take action, not on the part that you have in front of you, but and make decisions from the available options based on given conditions to guide and determine present and future decisions. If that, I might have to slow down and read that, but. And one of the advantages to that is, besides keeping the board out of the weeds, as we keep using that terminology, it allows you all to make those high-level decisions. It's much faster, and we don't have to take so long and then put, for example, a dress code change on a board agenda to bring it to you all to be approved.
So let me give you an example of how some of this would work. So on page 7, section 2, you'll see composition of the position and classification plan. So you won't find that in this document. The way the board approves that, I would bring that forward as a part of the annual budget process, as an addendum or as a piece of the overall upcoming year's budget that you would consider for approval. Does that make sense? So you don't find it in here. It comes forward in a different venue or a different way. I'm sorry.
That's okay. An example of that would be, in this change here, is we have added some additional, we're trying to reward long-term employees. So we currently have vacation leave that accrues at 8 hours a month, but we're attempting to adopt the longer you're here, the more you can accrue. This is what you would approve. We would put it together, but this is what you would approve as part of this overall.
And how would that come forward? I mean,
This is included in that.
so for them to amend it, they don't have to amend the policy itself?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But you would have, obviously, you would, guide that.
So if you brought that forward, or when you bring that forward, would you also bring forward the financial implication of that? Because you have to carry accrual on the books.
Yes, you could, because if you had to approve that, you absolutely would have to testify.
You saved me there. I was going to say in my best Steve voice, how much is that going to cost? Because obviously we've got people that have been here 10, 15 years.
And that's a good question. So the question that I would have is the difference between what this is and what we currently have in place.
This is just an example to show you that you still have the authority of that. We would still bring you all the information and implications from changes.
And I know as part of the annual audit, they put the liability out there for sick leave and vacation leave and all that. So.
And retirement.
You have rollover capability in
Anything over 240 hours of vacation time rolls into sick leave.
So you have a cap on
I
vacation.
mean, yeah.
And that's generally following North Carolina standards on the retirement system. That's what we have in Mecklenburg.
So
That could be
that
used.
is exactly what I was going to say too, and in that case, it really is not going to have implications because once you hit that cap on December 31st, those extra hours are going to move to sick, which becomes part of the retirement system.
Which is a benefit as employees in retirement, they have more hours. So, again, this is exactly the same thing that's on the one that we have, just because you wouldn't have, and all policies would be included with this. This is just the part you would adopt. And it would all be in the same handbook, but this is the part that you would adopt, and it would include the exact same thing as we have in the original. Nothing is changing in that aspect. We're just putting the more administrative daily policies into the hands of the town manager. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well,
So, how do you want questions, like all my little purple Post-it notes here, to come back to you?
Well, I think the best way to do that is we should have a workshop where we address the board and manager protocols and the personnel policy, and to sit down and dive into this stuff.
That way it's just not Steve asking a question and none of us get to hear it. Or
Well,
Yeah, I didn't mean it that
Well,
way.
no,
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
looking for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
Jeez.
yeah.
Yadkinville, North Carolina. How
That's
ignore
not-
that one.
that's
Wine
not-
is gone.
The wine's-
Yeah. So I think that's the best. So what we're doing, so we're rolling it out today for you all to, and we can get into as much detail as you want to today, but I think after you have some time to digest it, we can set up a workshop and really, dive into this and make sure everybody's comfortable with what's in here or not in here. And I think the message is here, the board still has, you have control over the personnel policy, and then with these items within the personnel policy, you also have control, approving the pay plan through the budget process. Merit increases, that's part of you would have the you would have the approval on what the merit pay is going to be. So the board, although you're adopting a policy at a high level, many of the things you're going to adopt at a pretty specific level through other processes. Now, there may be some exceptions to that. I'll give you an example. In here, I don't know what section it is, but there's a section in here about employee grievance.
Page 5.
Okay, so the employee grievance process. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just.
No, that's fine. What the board is saying at a high level, okay, that you want a grievance process for staff. And then I would be responsible for going back and setting out, okay, here's the number of days. And I mean, that doesn't fall on you to figure out what that process is going to be. It's just I would set up a process and then administer it. Does that make sense? So you're setting up the high level, employees should have a grievance process. And then I'm coming back and saying, okay, here's what that process, and it'll be a pretty standard process, but here's the number of days if you want to file a grievance, the number of days that the manager or the department head has to respond, and the grievance hearing, and it'll lay out all that stuff. So that,
And, yeah, we actually have those now. They just would be probably, we would have to review all those with the town manager. See if anything wanted to be changed or adjusted, but it's something that you wouldn't have to deal with on a daily basis. Every time something.
and some of the stuff is pretty boilerplate, fair standard,
Yes.
Fair Labor Standards Act, safety, that sort of thing. It's acceptance of gifts and favors, that references general statutes. But you need to be, like page 16, section 6, then there are some things that are pretty specific about, as an example, employment of relatives. And not to say, this isn't a reflection, we employ folks that are relatives now. I generally don't think that's a good idea, but that's ultimately, you have the final say on that. And that relates to, more specifically, let's say in the police department, you had a sergeant that was the brother of one of his patrol officers. I mean, that's probably not a good idea. So that's where that sort of thing comes into play. But you need to really find out if you're, we need to hear from you to what degree you're comfortable with that sort of thing.
Is longevity pay a new item too?
No, we've had that before.
Okay,
But this falls under your purview, the board's purview.
But it's been in place already?
Yes, it's already been in place, and it's the same, has nothing changed.
But merit is a whole
New
new.
Yes.
from one.
That's all new. That's why I was asking the question.
Yeah.
How do you want to talk about that?
And you approve the funding for the merit program.
Does that replace cost of living?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going away from cost of living, it'll be 100% merit. Then we have to decide, what those standards are, what the levels of, you have below standards, meet standards, exceeds, and outstanding. I mean, what the levels are, what the percentage are associated with that, and that would come through the budget process.
We already decided that back prior to this. This is the last budget year of
Yeah.
the COLA.
Yes, in July 1st, everybody got a 3% cost of living increase.
Right, correct.
2015. Moving forward, everything is going to be merit.
Starting July 1st of this year.
Yes. Yeah.
So not to be answered
Yeah.
now, but do you feel it's your purview to design the performance, a 1, 2, 3, 4, a 1 through 10, or whatever, or part of, as a policy board,
Yeah.
we need to ensure fairness.
Yeah.
So where does our part stop and
Yeah, well,
your part?
So I would
begin?
make a recommendation just broadly on, here are the different ratings that folks, you have below standard, just as an
Yeah.
example. So you have below standard where you get 0, and you get, and then you have standard, which would get and then the idea is to have a certain amount of spread between, as you move up, there's a little more incentive to perform a little better as you
Right.
move up but obviously the resources are limited. We can only do so much. So the bottom line comes down to, okay, here's how much money we have available for the merit program. Here's the best mix of percentages that should be available. And then we would kind of target individual. Obviously, everybody can't be outstanding. So then it comes down to department heads and myself to make sure that, we're really serious about a standard employee versus an employee that exceeds standards versus one that's outstanding, and having those parameters in place.
Well, that's what I was getting at, though, because you could have as a policy, we're going to do team-based performance review,
Yeah.
feedback. Is that part of what you would bring back to us? Not our evaluation of them, but part of the policy is we're going to go onto a 4-point system, and as a management team, we're going to do team-based decision-making, where you bring all of your HR staff, all 20 of them, when you forward and, you evaluate, hey, this is how I've evaluated it. And then compare and contrast across levels and stuff. I mean, how complex are you going to
What do you
want to
think?
come forward with?
I would think that that would fall under the purview of the town manager.
That's, okay.
I guess that'd
Yeah,
be my
that's-
question, how deep in the woods are we getting there? Do we let him say?
That's what I'm asking. How deep do you want us to
Well, I
go
think-
when we get ready for
I
this
think
meeting?
the most important thing is for the board to agree, okay, here's the total amount of money that we're gonna set aside for merit. And then here are the percentage increases that we will make available for each level of rating that an employee receives.
Should we decide that number or should you decide that?
Well, I
number?
think
Based
y'all
on the
have to
budget.
approve, y'all, I think,
Well, I mean, in your presentation of the budget, this next year, we're gonna set aside 5% max.
well, but it'll be a $150,000 number or whatever it is for the total merit program. And then within that, here are the percentages that are associated with that.
Versus me as an employee, that I can, if I'm an excellent 4-star, 5-star employee, whatever, I get 5%.
What he's getting at is, he's asking for 200,000, here's the percent that you could get in that level.
Yeah.
So then he's gonna have to take it
I
back
have
to
to
staff and
administer it.
manage it.
Yeah,
and
right.
administer it.
Yeah, we can't blow the
That's-
budget up. Everybody
yeah, that's
can't be
right.
outstanding. I
That's
mean,
right.
Cap,
Yeah.
There will be, there'll be a cap based on what well, you mean by department?
yeah, and level of.
Cap of what?
There could,
her title is.
there could be, but it gets a little tricky when you have a one-person or two-person department, and maybe both of them are, performing at a very high level. But, so I have to manage all those working parts within it to make sure,
Yeah, I'm comfortable with what you're saying. I just kind of.
And those are great, I mean, those are great.
So is the reviews gonna be annually, or are they gonna be semi-annually? So
Annually.
they know where they're going?
How do you measure the, lowest to the highest? Is there an objective measurement?
Well, we are tying all our customer service training, some of the initiatives that you all put forward for operational excellence. We are creating some programs, all that will be tied into our performance evaluation, so we don't have to earn any kind of merit, and we will want them to.
But I would certainly also expect that if they got to their annual review and there's a 0 in any category, that's not the first time they should have heard about that
Right.
0.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
There should be a long paper
Yeah.
trail somewhere before that 0 being popped in
Yeah.
my
And that's
paper.
what we teach and train.
Do you do a monthly?
I'm sorry?
Do you do like a monthly review of how am I doing, or this is?
Some department heads do, some department heads don't, but that is something that I'm preparing supervisory and leadership training right now, and we're also looking at some other avenues that will all be included in that training. How often should you do this? I know we're not gonna do this, but it's trending that many organizations are moving away from the performance evaluation and doing something on an ongoing monthly basis. And I think we should be doing that anyway, so that's what will be part of it.
I'm used to the ongoing monthly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think where Warren's, just my view on it is, and each department head knows what the level of responsibility is and what the expectations are. The same as the board, but you have to know, and you're gonna be the expert on what their level of, or what you're holding them to. The same as, but you have to know that.
Mhm.
And on the flip side is the board has to hold you responsible,
Right.
but until we know what you're doing and what your responsibilities are, we can't
Right.
make a decision.
Exactly
So
right.
that's another thing of communication and information sharing.
And I'm gonna be putting a lot of pressure on department heads, because this is all trickles down, so it comes from the board to me, and then me to department heads, and department heads to their supervisors, to make sure this system is fair and equitable and being implemented, the right way. I mean, everybody can't be outstanding, I mean, whether we like it or not. Everybody doesn't get a trophy at the end of the day, so.
So, go ahead, Tom.
You have, these are merit increases and merit bonuses, two separate.
Now, the bonuses are different.
Yes, the merit bonus was in our former policy, so I attached it here. You all can discuss that, make that decision on that. I don't know that we've used that.
Well, what that is, that's when somebody's reached the max.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that should
that's
be,
what I was asking.
yeah, that should be the
Yeah.
exception. And what happens, so instead of getting a percentage, you can get a one-time lump sum
Right.
if you reach the max of your range.
And then it's based on that percentage. So in my case, me personally, I'm maxed out.
Okay.
And every year I get an annual review, and whatever my percentage I would have gotten in this increase, they just cut me a check and hand me the check.
Yeah. It doesn't
And
get
it
into your salary.
doesn't change my salary, I'm in the pay classification band, never changes. The only way I can change that is get promoted or change job classification.
Okay, now, I'm not familiar with this at all. I've been self-employed
Right.
for 30-something years.
You're always outstanding.
That's what your review said.
Let me ask you, these are merit increases, that means it's a permanent
Yes.
change in
Yes.
pay. So therefore, somebody can't expect to be the top every year. They're gonna slide back and forth. So on the average, if somebody wants to catch up, just do a better job.
Absolutely, and we're going to be holding training on how to do this properly.
The risk is Warren keeps hiring more and more of the high achievers.
Right.
He's gonna be asking for more money to keep the high achievers. I
But you're
mean,
going to get a lot done.
yeah, that's right, because we're getting a lot done.
Okay. That's a good question. It is built in.
So that ties back though to my other question though, the percentage versus a dollar amount or a kitty. So if we say 4% is the max you can earn, and then you say, okay, so our total budget for salaries is 100,000. We're going to budget 104,000 to cover that. And full well knowing everybody's going to be a 4, we'll still have money then left over in that kitty by budgeting the 104 on the 4% number.
Yeah, you get into just budget. It's a budget. You may come over. You may come under. You may come in a little over. Where we got to find it somewhere else.
Well, how would you come over though?
Well, you shouldn't come over. So generally, the way it would work, let's say, just for simplicity's sake, say the percentages were 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the average is a 2.
Right.
Well, let's say you budget, you take all your salaries and you budget, you multiply it times 2.5%, and you get a number.
Right.
So that's basically what
Then you may
got.
pull over a little bit on that. I get that now. But versus saying that we're going to have 103,000, and if we had for some reason a bunch of 4s, well, we can't pay out 104,000, so we're going to cut somebody, even though they shouldn't have been cut because they did the job. I just feel more comfortable with saying, and again, as an employee, okay, this is 4% is the max I'm going to shoot for. I'm not going to have to worry about what they're going to run out of money when they get to me because they've given people on each side of me money. I'm going to shoot for the 4% because that's what they promised me if I do X, Y, and Z.
They never promised.
Well,
You
that's
really
what
never promised.
I understand, but that's what they set as expectations for me. They said, if I do X, Y, and Z to the very best, then 4% is where I'm going to land.
Well, see, we're hitting on a lot of things. It's easier to do a cost of living. So everybody gets a trophy.
Right.
And so if everybody gets the 3%.
Even low performance.
Even
Which is
low
what we're trying
performance.
to-
So to making it a little more complicated, but more rewarding for the higher, then you get into all of these scenarios. It's not as cut and dry. So yeah, it will be a little bit messy around the edges here and there. But it's up to me and the department heads to manage all
But to
that.
Brenda's point, if you're having the monthly conversation,
Right.
that person's gonna know
Oh,
whether
yeah,
or not
absolutely.
they're making progress.
Towards that 4%.
Yeah.
And you're not going to always have folks that are going to meet their expectations.
Right,
And
absolutely.
That's where, but like you said, they should know that before they get to there. And if they don't know that, then
Yeah,
that's,
and somebody's not
that's
doing their
bad.
job. Yeah.
So I should probably know this, and I know this might be a dumb question, but in the private sector, you had exempt, non-exempt, and overtime. And I don't see anything like that. So does everybody get overtime but you?
No, go ahead.
We have, no, we have overtime, and then we have comp time also that we can,
But how do you
The
distinguish in the
That should be-
employee?
it's actually listed, we actually do have a part of that in here, I'm not sure.
And I'm familiar with exempt versus non-exempt employees being identified in the pay and classification plan.
Yeah.
But you won't,
Yes.
that's not in
Yeah.
here.
I just was trying to clarify, because, and does overtime kick in or comp time kick in after 30 hours a week? Because that's what you define a full-time employee.
No, it's over,
Would be
we
40.
follow, it's over 40 for exempt. But department heads are not exempt. I mean, department heads are not exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act. So we have exempt employees and we have salaried and hourly employees. And anybody over 40 hours, if you're hourly, gets comp time.
Yes.
I just didn't see it in the definitions. That's why I was asking the question as to
That's
where.
That's a good
it's-
point, I
yeah.
can correct that, but for ACA purposes, it's 30 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's federal law that would
That's
follow.
fine.
Yeah, but I just didn't see a
Yeah.
definition,
Yeah.
that's all.
Yeah.
So did you say over 40 gets comp time or they get overtime?
Either according to our policy, depends on how they would like to work it. Like,
Sure.
for example, Todd's boys, he calls them boys, so I said that. they get overtime, correct?
Yeah.
Natalie and her staff sometimes work with comp time, so we give them that option, we just keep track of it, departments keep track of it and make sure that it's all, and Ann as well.
So we can control that by budget.
Yes.
absolutely.
You
Okay.
can, yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
Isn't there a law when you get past?
We can do wrong too. in case of-
no, well, but that feedback has to come back from Warren to say, this is how we're administering the program, because otherwise, you're right, Jim, we could hurt Todd's voice.
Well, here's where it gets serious. So the police department, I mean, the chief can't give everybody comp time because then he's having to fill the shifts and he's got people at home. So he may want to pay overtime to keep the comp time off the
Yeah, you
books.
got so long before you have to give that comp time out. And if
Yeah.
you go past that, you're looking at lawsuits.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually came up with a policy a couple of years ago where if you earned 20 hours of comp time, you had to burn it by a certain amount of time. And we all agreed on it, we just never put it into effect, so this one.
Because then typically comp time costs you that plus overtime at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
you're having to cover that slot.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we need to drill down on that.
But ideally, every staff would like hearing this, but ideally, everybody would get overtime. That because we're such a small, I mean, would get paid for their overtime. We're such a small organization, we can't afford for a lot of people to be gone.
Yeah.
Out on comp time. So that gets figured into it as well. And I expect department heads to manage that sort of thing within their department.
Well, I'm sitting there thinking, your comment earlier, we do a great job on events, but they've got to put in a lot of extra hours. And how do you build that into a budget? And you're saying we're still building that financial system.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know about other departments, but in my budget, there's a line item just for overtime. And I-
Yeah.
And I figure out a percentage, and I think it's like 5 or 6% of salaries is what I put in for overtime. And it works out perfect. We don't ever go over.
My
That covers
guys,
court, training, everything.
yeah,
You can kind of look at your history too.
right.
Of what event, for events, for example, you can
And I
see
know
your
this-
history of what the overtime was and build that in as
And
well.
like my guys, they
We don't
work
have
a few lot of,
You don't have a history?
not of events. We never had.
well,
Lisa kept a separate
we kind of know the
spreadsheet.
people we
She
need.
had-
We just don't have the cost.
Yeah, we just haven't had that,
Right.
we haven't had these systems in place. That's,
Like, all my guys get paid overtime on July the 4th because everybody works it. But if somebody has to work
Yeah.
over 2 hours today, they might say, we're talking, I'll leave 2 hours early Friday. I said, yeah, take it as comp time, or you can take it as overtime.
Remind you though, overtime is not necessarily the evil thing it sounds like either, because overtime versus new hire, new training, new uniforming, and all that, sometimes, most times comes out cheaper just to pay overtime. To a degree.
I'm just
Yeah.
going down to the next step.
They're at the point where
Yeah,
it
but
tips, but
Yeah. And then you get into the new generation. When I was coming through, I mean, everybody wanted overtime. Now the new people, they want their time off.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this new generation, they don't care as much about the money as the time. So now there's these cultural things that are changing within, in our society. So we have to manage that side of it too.
Done a nice job of pulling this together.
So is vacation by the calendar year, or is it by the town's year?
Well,
How is it
well,
calculated?
you continue to accrue vacation until you hit a certain, so it really transcends calendar year.
When I was at Lowe's,
And can-
normally at the end of the year,
Yeah.
there was nobody that worked between the holidays because everybody took vacation.
Yeah.
Just be truthful with you, I mean, it was like a skeleton crew. You had like 3 people on the whole staff and 3 cashiers.
Ann's got the answer for that.
Well, everybody accrues their vacation and sick time each pay period, so it's 3.69 hours per pay period every 2 weeks. So it's accrued every pay period. As of December 31st, though, anything over 240 hours will be transferred over to sick.
So that's your max, 240.
well, that's the vacation point.
Yeah, so if I were one of the 10, or whatever the scale was, let's say if I was offered 15 hours, 15 days a year for vacation, I would just come up with a number of hours per pay period that I would be accruing. So it wouldn't, we don't just give it out front. You have to actually earn those vacation and sick hours each
So every
pay period.
year at the beginning, you don't get 96 hours. It's over the year you accumulate it.
Yeah, I understand
on
that,
page
but we
19.
did the same thing at Lowe's, but at the end of the year, I would take vacations, so I would have basically from the 26th of December through, because their year ended on January 31st, till January 31st, go back to work.
All right.
So I'd be off one whole month plus a week, because I would have all those accrued, because you had to use it or lose it.
All right.
We say we don't
It
lose
wouldn't
our,
roll over to sick leave, you just lose it.
Carried on the
Or
books.
wouldn't get any money.
And
On the
if
budget.
you look, when you were redoing this, did you look at the advantages of paid time off, just PTO?
I mean, no, I didn't really dive into it more than what we've already had. I just,
I mean, that includes whether you take the time, whether it's sick leave, you have a certain amount of hours per year, but you can take a vacation, sick leave, or whatever, it's just paid time off.
Yes.
A lot of companies afford that.
Yeah, and-
I didn't know whether you looked at that or not.
well, and this is also one of our selling points when we're bringing people in as well, to tell them what our holidays are, how we accrue, and vacation and sick time, how, we have to be competitive with areas around us, so yeah, that's working out there, our paid time off policy.
What is your performance review dates? Is it rolling amongst folks? Is it all one shot, everybody?
It's all, yeah, I would require them to be done before the end of the fiscal year.
I think
So
this year's
it's-
goal's May.
Yeah, so we set you have your work plan that's established and approved to start the year. You're evaluated on that throughout the year, and then May and June, you have your evaluation, your official final evaluation to get your recommended.
That it kicks in July 1 for them?
Right.
Okay.
We're going to start those, as department heads, we talked about it under one, so we're actually going to start those in May and have everything ready, so you can work that into the budget, merits into the budget numbers.
And everybody wants to know what the merit's going to be. Well, I don't know. I mean, so they're saying, well, we're working not knowing what we're working for. Well, you're right, because I won't know what the budget numbers are until I know what the budget numbers are. So,
It's real world. The chaplain discussed the ethics policy. He said you make reference to it. I didn't see it, but did I miss it? That not put the policy in here, but reference the fact that we will all abide by the town's ethics policy.
But I can add that as well.
Does it belong here, or does it belong in the I'm just asking the question. It's got to be in one or the other.
that was going to be a separate.
Yeah, it's separate in the way Hickory does it, which we all really did like. So I don't know how you would choose to do that.
I mean, everybody will have to abide by. Go ahead.
Well, I know that at your next meeting, you all will be discussing the ethics policy.
Right.
So,
But chaplain specifically said, we'll have an ethics policy, we have to abide by it, and that you wouldn't put it in the HR policy, but you'd make reference.
Okay, we can-
That's all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we can do that.
Would that probably be appropriate at the beginning then, in
No,
the first article under the
probably-
personnel system?
Well, there's a gifts and favors. We're probably under that.
Okay.
We'll
He has the policy, this policy now. So,
yeah. So there's a gifts and favors, the political activity, probably the.
Under the conditions
Yeah.
of employment, in Article
Yeah.
D5.
Yeah.
I imagine he'll come back with
Yeah,
suggestions.
and those are good. Those are the sorts of things we do.
Yes.
I have one more question.
You can ask as many as you want.
So your vacation leave is 8 hours per month, and then your sick leave is a separate, it's not together, like,
Right, that's correct.
it's 8 hours per
That's
month.
correct.
And everybody earns 8 hours regardless of your time here. If you're here 20 years, you still earn 8 hours sick time.
Yes. that is
After
correct.
30 days.
Right.
And then FMLA kicks in if there's a long-term.
Yes, ma'am.
Since we're on, okay. 2 quick questions. The departmental rules and regulations, was the comp time versus overtime an example of that? Where
Yeah.
you say, each department may have some unique stuff?
Yeah, I think it's better just to manage that. It's hard to have a blanket.
Right.
Yeah, so I
But
think
that's what you're trying to get at, things like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then the only other question I had was above that, you have a statement that employees of advisory or specialty boards and commissions. Who are employees of advisory boards and
That
specialty?
is, that has been changed in the policy that I handed you.
Okay.
We did correct
Okay.
Brenda mentioned FMLA, should that pop in under Article 7, employee benefits? Just as it's referenced in the policy?
I was looking to see if it.
It's not mentioned anywhere.
Yeah, if it's mentioned anywhere in the policy, the FMLA, because a lot of people don't understand that benefit, that they probably should.
Sorry, I can't tell you off the top of my head. I'm seeing the old personnel policy as well in my head, so.
Well, I didn't find it anywhere.
Okay,
I didn't even first time through.
I'll definitely add it because I think it should be in this part.
Should it be under the employee benefits section around unemployment insurance and all that?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Or under the leave section? yeah.
Leave section.
Holidays and leave, probably.
Yeah.
FMLA.
Okay.
We'll dig into
Is
this.
this what you're hoping
Yes,
to get back
perfect.
there?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so, yeah, so we're not expecting y'all to pass it today, but, you know, we will come back. We just wanted to get it out to you so y'all can start digesting it, see what kind of changes and clarifications you need. This is perfect.
So you want to dedicate a work session sooner than, rather than later on this, and then boards and protocols, or the
Right.
protocol? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
All right.
I know this has been like giving birth.
Over
Over
5
many-
years.
many
or so, like
years.
an elephant or something. All right. Okay. So, Dennis Rory, your turn.
Sure.
Do we need to get up and stretch before he gets going?
I don't know pretty much.
He's got all sorts of
I tell you what,
boxes.
y'all want to start back in about 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. That work?
I'll give him time to set
I don't want
up.
to do like, torture you like we got tortured in Raleigh. Oh my gosh.
All right, well, a lot's been said, kind of what's coming in terms of Dennis's presentation, so hopefully, I don't underwhelm anybody, hopefully, yeah, hopefully it meets expectations, but.
So in conclusion.
In conclusion, no, but really what I wanted to do today is, I won't call it, maybe to Warren's kind of earlier comments about he did maybe a 100-day assessment. I won't call it a maybe almost 90-day assessment for me, but I'll just say development services overview, maybe from my perspective as it relates to this broader topic of our infrastructure and kind of what are we doing about it. So just outline of the presentation. I'll give you a functional overview.
Real quick, just back one slide.
Back one slide.
I can't, it always bothers me, what's P?
Professional
Professional
engineering.
engineer.
Got it. I just, again, lots of stuff I was make sure I understood what I was looking at. Sure, professional engineer, thank you.
Professional engineering.
It's a fair question, because PE also in the project management is a project executive. It's a certified.
So
title.
professional engineer, okay.
Yeah, and so just as an example, or just some context, I'm generally not one for putting a lot of kind of titles behind names, but there are some legal implications if I don't put it there. And so if you see people who are putting it there, you should be able to look up their license number and all that business. You can look mine up, it's 3036902, but that's why it's there.
That's it? Is this good enough?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure thing. So just an outline, kind of high level, what are we going to go through over the next few slides? I'll give you a functional overview of the department, maybe outline what are some existing infrastructure challenges. Many of them have already been noted, but I think there's some pretty cool, I'll say cool visuals in here, or at least illustrative visuals in here that'll show you, kind of, it'll bring the abstract to very concrete. Give you a high-level update on some initiatives that are ongoing throughout the department and close us out. So from a functional perspective, development services is really broken up into 4, I'll call them divisions. And I'll use divisions very loosely because to some that could indicate people. And I'm speaking divisions very much functionally from areas of responsibility. And that's building inspections, which a lot of folks are familiar with, Main Street, planning, and then engineering. You'll see those on the next 2 slides. But the differences between kind of the black and the red text these are kind of areas of responsibility that roll up to each respective division. The black is where I'll say we're tracking, we're trending in a positive direction. The reds where I identify where we need some help and where some of our most significant challenges are within those respective divisions. So again, on the planning side, I think most of you will be very familiar with a topic or a professional area called current planning or development services. That's where your permitting functions happen. We do a lot of that, and so I think you all will be very familiar with seeing kind of the results of a lot of permitting functions. Some of the small area plans that you're familiar with, they're long-range plans, but the reason this is red is because one of the biggest kind of long-range planning efforts that either could fit in planning or engineering as a functional area is a long-range transportation plan. We talk a lot about it, but you'll see a little bit later where I'll call it, we have some plan misidentity. So on the engineering services division side, you see that's where the majority of the red shows up. And tying this to where we opened it up with Jim Prosser and what I made some earlier comments about why do I believe we're spending so much time talking about infrastructure? Because the history would show that that's one of the core functional service areas that municipalities provide over time. Not my opinion, it's really, if you look at kind of how city building has occurred, that's really a lot of the core functions. And so just core functions alone, I think it gets a lot of attention, but then specifically as it relates to us here in Waxhaw, these red areas are areas where we definitely are working, but we definitely need a lot of improvements. So just a high-level development services permitting framework, this is where you would see kind of a lot of what has gotten built has kind of come through this general process flow. There's a lot of detail that's missing, but overall, this is kind of how you get plans approved. So kind of at the onset, you have a town or municipality has a certain set of rules, regulations, and design standards that say what are the minimum expectations for design and performance. Along with those, you have construction that says how does it need to be built to ultimately perform the way in which the town expects. Developers submit plans at the staff level. Some of that has been reviewed at the board level historically. Some plans have been reviewed. That moves into the construction phase of a project. Generally, you have a municipality that's doing some level of inspections, issuing occupancy permits, which allow people to legally occupy the building. Then municipalities accept and maintain the infrastructure. And so kind of the red and black color convention are the same as you saw with the functional overview of the department. These are kind of areas, in my opinion, that need the most attention and quite frankly could yield, I think, the most bang for our buck if we really take these on as areas that we try to solve.
So you've got a 7-step process, and in essence, we've got 2 of the 7 things that are taking place, and 5 are either broken or not functioning at the level they need to.
That'd be my observation.
So when you
Go ahead.
well,
finish up.
when you boil it all down, this is why this is so critical.
Yep.
Even if everything was black except for one, the whole system's broken. It doesn't, and ours is beyond broken.
You kind of just answered my question, because I'm going to ask you if rules, regulations, design standards, and criteria are broken, then how can plan submission be working fine? What are we reviewing?
Excuse me. It's working fine based off of what's going on back here. I mean, quite frankly, all of this could be red, but
Okay.
if I'm having to really
Gotcha.
prioritize degrees of challenge, that's what you're really seeing, a certain level of me filtering what I think the
Okay,
biggest.
that's fair.
I think plan submission and construction are not in our hands. They're in the customers, the clients, the developers.
Well,
You know, basically our whole system.
I think the rules and regulations, and I would also offer that the way that our conditional use permits and conditional use zonings have occurred, those are a lot of board level decisions historically that have been made, that haven't been made at the staff level. So when I say plan submission, if we were to detail it out and say, once you have construction documents, this is at the staff level. But even before this, on conditional use permits and conditional use zonings, there's a certain level of design expectation that has been set outside of staff control.
Dennis, could I say something?
Sure.
I think this is not applying to building construction, not building, permitting. This is public works here we're talking about. Right. We're talking about highways, streets, anything that's absorbed by the county.
Infrastructure.
That's correct. That's correct. This is infrastructure that
Okay,
also
so
to do public. That's correct.
Okay, sorry.
That's correct.
Sorry, you interrupted.
So before Warren tries to jump the gun,
I'm helping you out.
Yeah, it's important that we try to kind of stay on target.
Yeah,
That is going to be very important, but
Just
I
keep
wanna
an
make
eyeball
sure-
on what's on the table.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we understand kind of this framework, so to speak, and if there's more questions, feel free to dive in. But
So
another one here.
Inspections is about infrastructure inspections, or is it about residential and commercial inspections of new buildings?
this is not about building inspections. This is about our public infrastructure. This
That's
is
why
our
I want
roads,
to make
our
sure that
sewers.
we do have our inspection department intact.
For
Is that
building
correct?
inspections.
For building, correct.
But our roads.
I understand that. It's two
Right.
different
And
things.
It's two different things.
And I want to make sure that our building inspection is intact.
The good news is building inspections is doing a good job.
Okay.
That's where.
That's the
Absolutely.
question I have.
There aren't any
So
issues.
we're talking about infrastructure.
But I want to offer this, though, that the expectation of what the public pays for is in the public infrastructure side, not the homes. So yes, to your question.
Well,
is there-
yes and no, because if that homeowner buys a home and they don't have inspections, or if they just pencil whip the inspection and the house collapses, it's his fault. It's the homeowner's fault, not the inspector's fault. Unless they come back and sue the inspection department.
Yeah, which I think we're saying the same thing because.
Because it's very difficult. I mean,
Yeah, what I'm saying is-
I understand that our responsibility
Sure.
as municipality,
Yeah.
we have more responsibility for infrastructure inspections than we do for residential. But we have to give the homeowner the right to feel safe in their home or go into a safe commercial property.
Well, I mean, and I would say this, to a certain degree, that's a policy level decision of how much do you want individual homeowners to feel safe in their respective homes. But from a legal framework, and you can kind of test this, the obligation to maintain roads is one of the few mandated requirements. So if we want to kind of sort out what do you have to do, what are really good things to do, yes, from a public safety perspective, building inspections, that falls into that category. And there's when I say inspections here, I'm referring to the public infrastructure, not the homes and
Well,
physical
I'm for you,
structures.
I'm not against you. I'm just wanting to make sure that
Sure.
our building inspections is intact.
Well, yeah, it's intact. I would.
But not infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe want to know more about kind of what's intact, what's not intact. Will you say that? Because I may have a different definition, but I think we are saying overall.
Because we're having such an influx of new construction that we can feel pretty confident that somebody moves into a new home, it's not going to collapse on them.
Okay,
That's where I am.
Okay.
Or it burns up, or if we're doing our fire inspections like we're supposed to
Okay.
do our fire inspections.
and what I intend to walk you through is, as much as that's important, what's equally important, especially to me and
It's
hopefully
probably
everybody
more
else,
important
is
than
that they
streets.
can get to that house.
Correct.
And
The
so that
driveway don't fall in.
collapse.
Right.
So, you know, overall, again, kind of why care? You know, some may think there's kind of a moral obligation, like we should be doing this because it's the right thing to do. You know, I'm not here to get into that level of detail other than to say legally, I think there is some legal direction that says what a municipality's kind of core functions are. And so if you don't take anything else from this presentation, I hope that you take that we have a legal responsibility to do something about our infrastructure. And so I won't read all of the text. I did point out kind of one of the few mandated requirements. You'll see some other information about stormwater management programs. And these second two bullets are really trying to get at how does a municipality protect and promote the health and morals, order, safety, and general welfare of society. These are pretty broad statements. There's a certain level of specificity around these two that ultimately try to address what's a little bit broader. Any questions there about some of the legal setup? So I thought this graphic would be helpful just to really emphasize the point that to Warren's earlier comment about the permitting framework, all of these functional areas are interconnected. So if we, at the core, if this is our goal, if our primary goal with maintaining critical infrastructure is to protect the public safety, health, and well-being, if we choose not to take on any of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, we're placing ourselves at a certain level of risk. And so, to me, in a certain sense, you can't have one without the other. So at the top, what are our rules, regulations, and design criteria around what we expect for our public infrastructure? So I can show you some of it. So Warren was trying to steal my thunder a little bit earlier, but we have a street improvement policy, and I'll encourage you guys to all take a look at it if you like. That's one document. We have a section in our current UDO, in the subdivision section of the UDO, that speaks to certain public infrastructure requirements. And so, not to be critical of anything that we currently have on board, but that our level of detail right now, what I've been able to find is broken up between those two documents. Now, if you want to look at kind of what's happening in the marketplace, and the way I would define the marketplace here is other municipalities. This is the town of Huntersville. This is the city of Charlotte. This is the town of Holly Springs, and again, I encourage you to pass this all around so everybody kind of takes a look. City of Raleigh.
I don't understand why Huntersville was complaining about I-77 if they got everything baked into their document.
They copy everything from Charlotte.
And so what's being passed around right now, quite frankly, are set, if you want to think about it this way, there are a set of expectations for developers primarily, or anyone who plans to build public infrastructure within those respective municipalities. They're the rules, they're the design criteria, they're the construction standards.
We don't have that.
Well,
To the degree that Charlotte and Holly Springs and Huntersville and the rest of them.
right, I'm passing around what we have right now.
Yeah, you're talking that we'll have in all of these areas, or are you just talking about the top?
Well, right now I'm speaking directly about the top.
Okay.
Okay, but I wanted you all to take a look at kind of what we have, what's kind of in the marketplace, so that we all have a clear understanding, or at least a consistent understanding of maybe where we are, where the market is, and where we're attempting to go. Yes, sir.
Now, we do have something in that we reference the North Carolina DOT standards, which, if you know, DOT standards are, but we don't enforce it.
On certain things.
Okay, not on everything.
Correct. So now, that's kind of the rules, regulations, design criteria in terms of program areas, street maintenance and resurfacing. I think Jim spoke a lot about a pavement management system. You'll hear more about that later. construction inspection as a program activity or program area. Right now, we don't have that as a formal program. Quite frankly, Todd, he and his guys have done a lot of good work in that area, and I think they've done it out of just kind of recognizing that there was a need, there was a gap, and they just did something about it. So kudos to those guys for doing what they're doing. But quite frankly, I don't think they have the resources and have been resourced to do that type of activity. That's a pretty big program area of work along the lines of water quality, sediment erosion control, stormwater management, and again, these are all building to doing what we have some level of legal requirement to do. So stormwater management, we'll just kind of run through some pictures, and Todd, he provided me a lot of these pictures, so thank you, but feel free, Todd, to jump in if I'm getting my areas wrong when I'm starting to kind of get to the wrong areas. But from left to right, this is North Providence Street. And so this is an existing drainage ditch that's pretty much maxed out. Where it's at the same elevation, you can actually see a little bit of water starting to spill over on the sidewalk. On the surface, that can look like a minor problem. It's truly not. Over time, you're starting to get erosion issues that occur. And fortunately, we don't have someone trying to kind of pass this area, but with a little bit more rainwater, the sidewalk starts to get completely covered, and that becomes impassable from a pedestrian mobility perspective. Water also has potential to jump out into the road, which also creates some other issues. This is some kind of individual, or excuse me, off the right-of-way stormwater kind of challenges or problems, quite frankly. And we really shouldn't have kind of open channel flow just kind of running in a pretty unorganized way.
That water there is coming off of 75.
Yeah, thank you, running across someone's property. From a floodplain management perspective, which is also really a broader component of stormwater management, this is the bridge at Waxhaw Marvin. I took this picture a little bit before Christmas. Warren and I were out taking pictures, or I was out taking pictures during a heavy rain event, and I was still pretty new, and I asked around the office to kind of take a little informal survey of why people thought this was occurring. And at the time, a few folks thought that there was something kind of downstream in South Carolina that was blocking the water, that was pushing it back. My initial read was, or initial assessment, if we want to kind of keep similar terms as earlier, was we have a lot of uncontrolled runoff that originates on private property and empties directly into our creeks and streams, and it's getting there so fast that the streams can't process it. And so typically you would have a stormwater management program in place that has requirements for individual property owners, mainly commercial property owners, but a lot of times in large single-family developments where there is a pond or some sort of stormwater management facility that captures the water on site and releases it slower so that we don't get to an issue where the stream or the creek is about to overtop the bridge, which my understanding was a couple of months prior it had overtopped that bridge. Again, stormwater management. Todd, is this Mill Ridge right here?
Yeah.
So, we could put these three pictures either under stormwater management or sediment and erosion control, but I see a lot of my observations, so look at this picture, I see a lot of graded land, no silt fence, kind of ponding water and clearly sediment. And all of this water makes it into our storm drain systems and ultimately makes it into our streams and creeks. Kind of contractors, and this is during some of the residential home construction and kind of the quality of streets that we're otherwise going to be asked to take over and maintain at some point. Now, this is a lot of uncontrolled sediment. This embankment should be grass. Definitely should have some straw down to help with what you see, these deep ruts. And again, all of this is running out to the asphalt surface. So kind of current state, just on the stormwater management side, right now we don't have really a dedicated funding source, staff, and quite frankly, policy guidance on how do we want to handle stormwater management broadly. We do have a stormwater design manual, which is helpful, but that's one tool in our toolbox, and quite frankly, it's missing a water quality component. So it's really intended to address how much water, not the quality of the water that exits the site and gets back into our streams and creeks. So in terms of a
Question.
excuse me.
So help me, let's see, Lawson, Millbridge, they have curb, gutter, storm drains. Where do they dump into?
I can't tell you all the specific outfall points, but I can tell you where it ultimately goes to, some version of 12 Mile Creek.
Okay, so then back to your picture 3 or 4 back with the, right there. That's on the older part of town side.
Right.
What's the answer to that? I mean, are you talking about going in and putting storm drains and creating a exit point also in Hillcrest, in my neighborhood, Waxhaw Meadows, in any of that location to negate the storm?
Can you hold that question for a couple more slides?
Sure.
Because I want to address that comprehensively. If
Okay.
you can wait just a few more slides, even if you need to ask it again.
No problem.
Okay. This is a great question. So future state, these are a set of recommendations that quite frankly I propose to warn and you know, definitely leaving it in this presentation so you all can take a look at them. But one of my recommendations was that we update our stormwater ordinance. It's currently a 2-page document that has a lot of references to Charlotte and Charlotte's design standards, and so that leads me to believe that there's some updating that needs to go on, and also make sure that it has a strong relationship to our UDO that is getting rewritten. Those 2 documents, in my opinion, or 2 ordinances, in my opinion, at least should not be standalone. They should have a relationship to one another, so that as you're getting your land use entitlements, you also are getting a certain level of expectations around stormwater management. Yes, sir.
So that says non-development related activities, but if you go back one, that would be development related activities. Do we have that? Obviously, we don't have it covered, but
A little bit right there. When you say for development-related
Yeah.
activities, there's a little bit of kind of coverage right here.
so is it on us to make sure? I'm not being critical of anybody, but should we be making sure they have the silk fence and all that stuff, or is that?
Well, so I would say in kind of Dennis's view, it would be staff would be able to do that, manage that through an inspection program. But from a board perspective, when we get especially to this bullet, does the board have interest in taking on a stormwater utility, which would start to get into identifying a dedicated funding source to hire enough staff that could establish certain rules, regulations, and ultimately inspect and implement whatever rules we put in place. So I think if you want to know kind of where's the kind of biggest question for the board, it's going to be right here.
And from a broad policy level, town vision perspective. So here's your current vision. Waxhaw is a friendly, vibrant, and prosperous town where history and creativity build an enduring, safe, and healthy community for people of all ages to live, work, play. What we're seeing is that that's probably not true. It's not true. It's not accurate. That's not aligned. That's not to say we don't aspire to be there, but so now are we going to start aligning resources, or are we going to change the vision, or are we going to start aligning resources to really fulfill the vision in a serious way?
And so taking that a step further, and I don't understand this stuff, so I don't know what would go into fiscal year 18, 19.
Sure.
But if I'm looking at Millbridge and the bulk of all that development's coming, would we be advised to look sooner rather than later? Or, I mean, or could we even consider that? I mean, could we even get something in place, some app?
So that would be logically, I would say sooner rather than later. And this is where we probably need some help on the legal side, because for Millbridge, a lot of those entitlements, those land use rights have already been granted.
Okay.
And so for us to now impose new rules on someone who they already have their rights, their land rights, under a certain set of rules, for us to now go back and impose some new rules, I think we could get ourselves in some trouble if we kind of went that route.
I don't think it's even that, Dennis. I think there are rules in place at the state level, and the state has chosen to ignore enforcing it. And we're faced with the decision, do we accept the state's abandonment of an important item like this, or do we step in, bear the state's burden to keep our vision the way it should be? My recommendation is yes.
Yeah, and I'll just offer this perspective on the state, not to defend them at all, but a lot of their budgets, their rules have been set up that minimize their staff to enforce this. So if there was even a desire on their side, they have in my opinion, been intentionally positioned to not be able to succeed. Yes, ma'am.
Dennis, in these documents that you passed around, I'm just looking, kind of thumb through them, and I'm looking at the volume. Is this all we have, or we have this including what's in the UDO? Or?
That and about 3 more pages that are in the UDO.
Well, I sure thought
And
it was
this,
long.
and I also noticed that this was 2009, and all of these are 2014 and 15 for other towns, so it looks like they've updated.
So they generally, I'll say in Charlotte, annually, actually twice a year, those land development standards are vetted.
Really?
Yeah, there's
Twice a year?
not the entire document, but twice a year, basically the development community, they're allowed to provide some feedback and say, hey, you know what, standard ABC, it really isn't working, here's why. The staff looks at it, evaluates whether or not, there's something legitimately going on that could be tweaked. If so, then a recommendation is made to change that particular standard twice a year.
Well, but then back to, again, not to that question, but something along it. So Millbridge is being built right now. They've got how many of them built? There's no flooding going on in the built part. The citizens wouldn't stand for that, I'm certain, right?
Don't have a choice. We get it over Prescott, we have a choice.
No problem.
So in your neighborhood right now, the part you live in, you have flooding?
Yes, the water from 12 Mile Creek comes back into the pond and up near the pool.
Yeah.
Stormwater pond.
Yeah, there's problems.
You don't have to worry about refilling the
Huh?
There's nobody at the
There's
state
nobody,
level that
I
cares.
mean,
So that was why I thought it was so important to dig out what everybody else has
Same
versus what
thing as
what we
those municipalities.
How many times have I
reach the
seen
same decision
12 Mile
that the
Creek
state's
on
not
Highway
gonna deal
16
with,
almost
and
over?
they have to.
yes,
Close.
close.
A
lot of times close.
For the same
So
reason.
can I bring it back to
We're gonna
something
do that
we're
for
all
56
one more
years.
time? So when we talk about our givens on our strategic, so I talked about our vision. So now think about our strategic initiatives. We talk about creating reliable and cost-effective infrastructure and systems and a manager, good stewards of the public and natural resources. So there's another one. So the reason we're having difficulty getting to building community engagement and economic development and quality of life services and all this other stuff, we're trying to get through the givens. We're trying to get through financial performance, operational excellence, and core infrastructure. And that speaks to what Jim was talking about. We can handle this much, or we can really focus on this much and do it. That's why if we do not get this right, there is not enough money to get it right moving forward. We've got to get this fixed. It is absolutely critical.
We don't even call it the 100-year floodplain anymore. We call it the 100-day.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's that frequent now.
And Mayor, let me, to maybe
Sorry.
clarify your earlier question about kind of, Dennis, these slides seem more development related, but stormwater utilities maybe about non-development related activities. I think, generally that's correct. I would say that bullet 1 has the its intent is to address the development-related activities. Bullet 2, or the second bullet, non-development-related activities. So kind of fix the stormwater ordinance and the design manual, which are more or less the rules.
Yeah.
Going forward, we should get a better outcome. But what do we do, Commissioner Hunt, about today, or excuse me, not today, but what do we do about kind of issues that are not really associated with new development? I think that's where we have our best opportunity to get a funding source in place to start addressing those types of issues.
So your funding source is going to be an increase in taxes.
Well, excuse me, for a stormwater utility, it's a user fee is generally kind of how it's described, and everyone does kind of participate in that user fee, and it's on kind of a pro rata basis on the amount of impervious cover that you have. That's generally how it would work.
Are there any other opportunities out there like state or federal, I mean, I don't know, that could help with that rather than increasing taxes for us as a stormwater fee tax?
I'm not aware of any other reliable, consistent revenue sources. I would say that funding certain improvements out of a general fund is another approach. It's currently the approach that we're taking. That presents a certain level of financial risk, quite frankly. So.
In Hickory, we used to fund our stormwater activities 50% out of the general fund, and then 50% out of the water and sewer fund. So we looked at it from a water quality on the water and sewer fund side and a water quantity on the general fund side, and we opted not to do it. Of course, we don't have a water and sewer fund in Waxhaw, so you're looking at a fee, you're looking at general fund, or you're looking at that, or not doing it. Or maybe some combination between a fee and the general fund.
Dennis, I know that right now, Union County is a lot more strict in their design and in their maintenance. Aren't we still in Union County? Don't we have some leverage of being in Union County? I mean, I'm looking at the development right next door to Anchor Forest, and they're doing that thing by the book. And I mean, they spent had to spend a lot of money on putting in ponds, construction ponds, to be reduced to permanent ponds. I mean, they're kind of cutting edge stormwater and erosion and sediment control. And they're there once a week checking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I would probably categorize it as precedent. I don't know if leverage, I would say that there's precedent for what we're describing. So we're not really charting off into new territory where it's unprecedented. Right here in the county, we have Union County, they have some higher standards around water quality and stormwater management. I think some other municipalities in Union County also have some of these requirements in place as well.
My point is, all these developments that are in Waxhaw are also in Union County. Why can't we ask Union County for some enforcement? Would it work?
Well, I guess theoretically we could, but since planning and zoning functions are municipal functions, I think a lot of this kind of falls under our municipal umbrella.
I understand. I'm just, outside, we're in a transition period. Maybe we go inside of the box for a while in the transition period while we're developing our own.
Question. County doesn't own roads. How do they enforce anything to do with the streets in the new subdivision?
What I see them enforcing, Jim, is the erosion and sediment control.
Okay.
And they have very sophisticated designs, and they have people that come to the site and inspect it, especially after.
Maintain.
I think Todd's got some.
I think the county's got it set up where you got a inspector 1 and inspector 2. Inspector 1, he puts down all the erosion control. The second inspector has to sign off on it. He's more up, and then they got a third one. A lot of these guys at Millbridge and all, they putting in the erosion control somewhat, but they don't maintain it. I mean, they might have silk fence all the way around the house, and a concrete truck comes in, pours concrete, knocks all the silk fence down. He's done. He drives off. It stays down. We don't have anything that says that he's got to go put it back up.
So they're only accountable to Diener, who only comes about once every 2 months.
And I noticed what Fred's talking about,
Town used to
In the
do-
county, it looks real good, but will it stay like that? Is anybody, watching them?
Town used to do it, whether or not they had the ordinance to do it, back before the downswing. In our subdivision, once a week, somebody from the town was out there checking it. And with the general contractor, the general manager of the site, who had to redo the silk fences and all that stuff and make sure everything was up, or they get fined. They used to do it, and something's changed with the downturn.
Be honest with you, I've never known us to go out and inspect silk print.
I can tell you used to when, in our
I've never done it, I've
subdivision,
been here 14
Back
years.
in the state.
It could have been,
once a week.
it could have been a state, or they could have a guy that's his job
They
for
hired
that
somebody.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when they sign off on it, they can lose their license if they don't keep it up.
Right.
So they will walk it once. You're supposed to walk your site every 7 days unless you get a
Right.
1-inch rain. And you might walk it today for your 7-day walk. It might rain 1.5 inches tonight. Well, you walk it again tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Or that's just the policy.
Yep.
But if you don't have that in place like we don't,
It's changed.
You're right, because
Something's flipped.
I've got the pictures of Todd and Carrie and
that's the other Dennis.
out there standing on the lot next to mine as we all watch the mud come through my backyard. And this is
And who knocked it over?
Fines, but those guys were there that night doing it, so you're right. So what is it gonna take for us to get this started?
We'll keep on pushing on here.
Yeah, kind of along the themes of, other than the pictures I showed you, kind of why care. These are, especially along the lines of stormwater management, really what we're talking about, or how do we maintain a certain level of compliance with a pending permit that's coming from the state, which is, we won't get lost in the acronyms, but basically the state, based off of a federal mandate under the Clean Water Act, passed down permit requirements to jurisdictions of certain sizes. And so a phase 2 permit applies to jurisdictions that have 10,000, a population of 10,000 or more. And what it's an unfunded mandate that says, on the topic of stormwater management, you shall do these 6 things. Now, we've exceeded that population size, but we haven't been issued that permit. So I think the message here is we're on borrowed time before we have to do these 6 things. And so in the kind of along the lines of, you know, is this something that's a priority item for me? Absolutely it is. And a lot of that has been driven by kind of this pending permit that the state will issue us at some point. And so I say it's a priority item for me, but I've communicated that back to Warren, and Warren has been communicating that with you all so that you're aware of kind of what's going on as it relates to stormwater management, and more importantly, kind of why should we care other than we like to clean streets, streams and creeks.
So the bottom line message there is the state will eventually come in and say, you absolutely are mandated to do these 6 things.
At the local level.
Which we know it now, aren't we?
Well, that's where we can't go out and do it tomorrow. I mean,
I understand.
I mean,
That's a
this
large
has
part of our
been, yeah.
right.
Number 4, construction site runoff control. There it is. That's what you said.
Yeah. Well, that's,
Tomorrow they put the mandate on it, we're not ready, so we'll be breaking.
Well, I imagine they put it in the consent with the census is when it happens, because we had last census where 9,900.
so the message, this is, whether we like it or not, this is coming.
Correct. Absolutely.
I guess my question though is back into my, I don't know if we got to that point, that's the question again though.
This is the point.
So,
It
Right.
really is. I mean,
Right.
this is it.
so Hillcrest, so Waxhaw Meadows, so Brenda's house,
Hillcrest drainage.
what are we paying for this fee when it's, I mean, are we gonna get pipes in our ditches versus, and then where are they gonna go? I
It'll be
mean,
triage, it'll be,
Yeah, I mean, so high level. I mean,
He's asking you for 1.8 million right now.
well, no, I'll tell you what this slide's all about. Credit to Greg Mahar. I think Greg got this off the ground, but he engaged CDM Smith to do a stormwater utility feasibility study. I recently became aware of the work, and so have gone through it. It's still in draft form in February 2015. is the date, but it's in draft form. I've been making some comments, but the key takeaways, at least I wanted to present here, was that particular feasibility study, and don't get hung up on the 1.8 just yet, but what it did was identify certain capital level projects, okay? And some of these have actually already been done. One of
2 and 5 are done.
2 and
Since
5 are
Parks and
done.
Rec started, thanks to Todd and Gregor's grading, so, and both came in a lot lower. Nesbit, number 2 is fixed for 75,000, and David G. Barnes was fixed for a couple thousand, thanks
Yeah.
to Public Services, so.
So, a couple of these have been done. Fortunately, they've been done well under what was estimated in the feasibility study. But to me, the takeaway is that it had identified over $1 million in what I'll call capital needs or capital improvement projects. And if you look at how our current stormwater budget is kind of separated or prioritized, we have about $25,000 a year that we are placing to capital level improvements. So what this tells me is at $25,000 a year, we're not going to catch any of this. And so without starting to really look at alternative funding sources, this happens to be one tool. There are others or different kind of arrangements, as Warren has noted earlier, but this happens to be one tool to use. And again, really, these numbers, these were budget numbers, and I can't speak directly with how all of them were developed, because that predated me, but it gives you, I think, an illustration of capital level needs are really expensive. Commissioner Hunt, a lot of these projects aren't associated with any active development. So this is kind of what's out there. This is what's in Hillcrest. To your specific question, do we put a pipe in the ground where there's a ditch? I would call those more design level decisions of what's the appropriate way to convey the storm drainage that's economical, that's effective, because you can re-engineer a ditch, or you can actually engineer a ditch that's currently not engineered that would convey the water just fine and could be much, much more inexpensive than a pipe. But a lot of those decisions get made during a design phase of the actual project. So hopefully I'm answering some of your questions. If not, please keep asking till I answer them.
But you are. I mean, it's just like, again, some of the neighborhoods that are just coming off the top of my head, ski trail. I mean, I've never driven up there when it's pouring down rain, but I'm guessing that they don't have flooding problems that prevent them from leaving or going into the neighborhood. I'm sorry?
That's in the county. Ski trail in the county, mostly.
Yeah. But, like I said, I don't know that the downtown area in the south side is built on the rural, again, the ditches versus drainage. All the new places, and it kind of astounds me that you've got new places that still have flooding. I just don't get how that works.
It all feeds into the same
I'll have some pictures. I mean, we have pipes that are not connected to one another. We have pipes that haven't been the dirt wasn't properly compacted before the pipes were put down. No one was there watching it and inspecting it and telling the contractor, you can't do that.
Right.
So it's in the ground, but it's not functioning properly.
So we can do a good job of going out and identifying the pipes that are screwed up. We have not done a good job of watching over when they were put in. And that's the crux of the
Or
problem.
even now, today, tomorrow, nobody's watching.
Right. So,
Just
sorry,
when-
yes.
When I look at your list, I don't see anything on Waxhaw Marvin, and I don't see the rest of the east side. I mean, so, but
Well, yeah, I think that's.
I'm sorry, it's not your list.
Well, I just think that's why it's key that it's in draft form. I think that's the type of feedback this particular consultant was looking for, but at the time, the dynamics were different. He just wasn't able to get that feedback, so he's waiting on feedback. If there are other problem areas that we know about, please send them to Warren so they make it over to me.
And there's a public safety side of this. I mean, think about in Hillcrest, I mean, there's neighborhoods where it floods and you got to go get people out of their
There's
homes.
4 houses that they can't
And
even get
The
out.
lady that we had the Swiftwater rescue, the young lady that went, I mean, there are public safety implications to this sort. It goes beyond just environmental.
This here, these that's on the board right now is just ditches. When they didn't go out and do that already had curb and gutter and all. They just did, we were just picking the ones that, the oldest and that had ditches, that needed the most help.
So basically, they waited till it rained really, really heavy and looked to see where there was a puddle.
Right. Like yesterday, we dug on North
A
Providence.
little bit more than a puddle, I guess.
I mean, but yeah, but that's what I meant. A large collection of water, we need to address that
Well, yeah, I
first.
mean, that's one of the,
Let me tell you,
that's
there-
one of
that's
the
a kind of
benefits
puddle.
of trying to solve stormwater management is that visually you can pick up a lot about where the problem areas are.
Hey, I got a good
West
example
North
for
Main
you.
Street in front of where the Riegelman house was, every time it rains, it's
Yeah.
all the way out in half the road. I don't see that on there. and
Can you
that's
go back
like
to that picture again
If
with
you-
all the water?
There isn't any erosion with that.
Okay, you see where that green grass is going across about middle ways? No, the other one, the first one. Yeah, right there.
That's the driveway.
We cleaned out all that this week. We found 2 pipes that went across the road that they had that much dirt on top of them. We didn't know they existed. Because that was a DOT road back there. That used to be Highway 16 before
Yeah.
Providence Road was put in.
Talking about public safety, the H.C. Nesbitt Park repair was done because you had over 2 feet of standing water every time
Right.
you get a good rain and kids kicking soccer balls into that
Yeah.
ditch. So a drowning hazard, that's why it got moved up
I
on
mean,
the
it was 2 or 3 foot of water.
So back to the point in time early in our tenure when we heard somebody sit at this table and tell us filling in Prescott Commercial was probably not such a hot idea. That's where all the water went. Where?
That was,
Your neighborhood and HC
that was
Nesbitt.
with the mayor.
No.
That's upstream.
Well, I've been here
Prescott
56
Commercial,
years,
what they did had nothing to do.
and that creek's always flooded.
Yeah.
Okay.
They did fill in the floodplain there. though.
It just had a little bit more room when
They
Prescott
opened
wasn't
the
there.
water flows through, so they're getting more down in Prescott.
Right.
Where that's exhibited, John, is on the east side of Providence Road in a high, you go over there and there's a lake on the
Right.
east side. That's what's blocking that. Now that's screwing up future development over there. Because if you take the 100-year floodplain,
Yeah.
we probably are filling it up every time it rains because of that obstruction.
But it used to flood once a year, not once a month.
Right.
Like it's doing now.
So stormwater management is just one topic. We're going to push on the
Sediment erosion control, closely related. So just, I'll let you all kind of make your own judgments or opinions about what you're observing, but closely connected to stormwater management.
Well, let me just
sediment erosion
ask one
control.
question. So, it seems that we have, again, just maybe a silly question, but it seems like we have an opportunity before the Y starts and the park starts to make sure that we have some form of a standard in place that ensures that we don't do more harm to 12 Mile Creek as we go along.
About 10 slides away.
Okay. Good.
So, but my observation is that the runoff, I mean, we shouldn't see, it shouldn't have so much sediment in it as it's
Yeah.
running off of a construction site. So I mean, all the sediment's pretty orange or brown. It actually should be a little closer to this color as it's running off an active construction site. A lot of that has to do with the sediment erosion control measures, silt fences, temporary drainage ponds, things of that nature that are being built, being installed, but not being maintained or monitored.
Right. The one in the middle was coming off of this side was Mill Bridge that's been built. The other side is Mill Bridge that's being built. And they met in the woods. I walked way down there and got that picture. But it's from a development already done to one that's not properly taking care of their silt fence.
So,
Like that first picture.
More pictures, I mean, the silt fence is ready to give. But just the amount of accumulation, quite frankly, shouldn't occur. And where this is occurring, this is occurring otherwise in what will be a road bed.
Yeah.
Because that's your storm.
That would be a backyard for somebody one day.
Just as a matter of information, I thought they weren't supposed to use the slotted type grates anymore because of bicycles.
Well, yeah, so generally, slotted grates aren't allowed kind of in the asphalt. I mean, I think DOT probably adopted that. Yeah, I can't speak to what standard that was built under, but I think that's a part of the broader dialogue here. What standard was this constructed under?
They don't have a weak
I
program.
used to ride a bike, and I've been caught in a manhole. It's really just there you are.
Yeah, yeah, these are usually turned the other direction. So, again, not a very high functioning silt fence right here because the street has all sediment in it. This is a pond. This is actually the pond behind the Heritage. Yep. So that's pretty brown pond. Shouldn't be that brown.
That would be our pond now, right?
It's our pond now.
Yeah.
Pond over in Mill. This is a Mill Bridge during a non-rain event. A non-rain event, that level of kind of turbid water is generally not a good thing, nor is it really accepted by a lot of minimum performance standards. So current state, I mean, the pictures kind of show a lot of it, and we've talked about it here. Commissioner Burrow probably talked about it the most. A lot of the requirements around erosion control, sediment erosion control occur at the state level. Inspections as well. They're well understaffed and quite frankly don't, in my opinion, have the ability to get to our specific issues, maybe on the frequency at which we would need them. And their enforcement capabilities are fairly limited as well. It's just how their role has been set up. And so just I would make that as an editorial comment. So future state, you know, what I've been doing and what I mentioned to Warren was really seeing what's happening locally here in Union County and even close by, and what would it take for us to adopt some of these functional activities or our own sediment and erosion control program locally. So that's what's going on right now in the current fiscal year, and just to jump the gun a bit, I think FY17, I would bring a recommendation back to Warren that we move in that direction, and it'll be his discretion whether or not he moves that forward, but that would be my intent, is to move that as a recommendation to Warren. Questions there? All right, so street resurfacing, we've talked about it, we've heard a lot about it, starting in a little bit different order with street resurfacing. Just to give you all, here's the current state, no surprise. We don't really have a formal program for how we get out to, how we prioritize the streets, which streets get resurfaced, quite frankly. A full understanding of which streets are under the town's maintenance responsibilities versus which ones are still otherwise developer or HOA. I'll use air quotes as owned, but definitely maintained. And so we're working on that. At the time at which I kind of presented to this to Warren originally, you know, we were reviewing and negotiating some professional services with an engineering firm to help us get to a better position on that. I made the recommendation to Warren that we move through with that. And so just to give you guys an idea of time frame when something could be up and running, I think if we were to move forward with getting a street resurfacing program together, we could have something available to us early, in FY16, but definitely a full program sometime during fiscal year 17. But just to walk through why is this important, a lot of these pictures are along Kensington Drive, but it's a pretty big deal in terms of the quality of that asphalt. A lot of it is not just the asphalt itself, but the intent of a street resurfacing program is really to address these types of issues after the streets have been built to a better standard, but it's to get out on a very disciplined schedule to resurface our asphalt, to fix certain problem areas. These are on the more extreme side, but I think broadly we have an understanding of why we would take on something like a street resurfacing program. Yes, sir.
Do we want to resurface before we understand why they failed? I don't think so, right?
I mean, generally you don't. I mean, resurfacing, and for specifically on something like Kensington Drive, resurfacing is probably not the answer. There's a combination of answers on how to fix different problems. Because a lot of what you're seeing right here, I would classify these as base failures. What's underneath the road is what's causing the asphalt to fail, not the asphalt quality itself. So what's underneath the road? And I put it intentionally under street resurfacing program because you all may be familiar with the term out of sight, out of mind, but what's out of sight really does matter. And so all these pictures are coming from Todd, and he does a lot of tremendous work around trying to understand what's underneath the surface that we can see. And just to walk you through, this is a pipe with a lot of the same sediment and dirt that you saw on the surface level. It's making it into the pipe. And so eventually, just like an artery, it gets too much, the pipe can't take it anymore. And so you start to see water actually come out of storm drains and pop the top of a lot of manholes because that pressure builds up and it has to go somewhere. So all the systems are connected. What we do on the surface with stormwater management and sediment erosion control impacts what gets into our pipes. These pipes fall into our streams and creeks. It's all connected. So what you see right here are two disconnected pipes. So very simply, the edge of this pipe should match the edge of that pipe. There shouldn't be at least on the screen, it looks like maybe a 2-inch gap between those pipes. That also allows for infiltration of sediment. It allows for water that is running through the storm drain to start to erode out the bottom of the pipe, which creates more settlement issues, and we see it at the surface level as a sinkhole. So generally, that's how it manifests itself as a sinkhole, and a lot of the times that sinkhole is being created because the pipes aren't connected. The water is basically free flowing into the ground and it washing out the dirt that it's sitting on.
And keep in mind, that's from Millbridge. Millbridge is not an old development.
Right.
I mean, this is relatively new.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it isn't fully built out yet either. And I think Todd mentioned, what'd you say, 71, was it 71?
Yeah, just in Reach Haven.
Was it 71 feet or 71 different segments of
71
pipe?
separated pipe.
71 separated pipe, that's all in Millbridge.
But the good thing about that, it's not good that they're separated, but it's not ours yet, so they have to fix it before we take it.
Right.
But the one with the power line in,
Yeah, so
that's
this,
ours.
yeah, this right here is.
That's one we did, that's before we had our camera.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I'm trying not to overstate it, that's pretty bad right there where you're running power through a storm drain pipe that's carrying the
We
water.
found one the other day that's got a gas line in it.
Yeah, but you can see the obvious issues of running power through a line that carries water.
But we're not responsible for the repair, though. I mean, the utility supplier will be.
No, the utilities will fix this one, and the gas people will fix theirs.
Right.
But the separated pipe, like in,
Right.
well, matter of fact, the Oaks, we had one the other day where water was running under the pipe for about 100 feet. It was put in 19 years ago in the county, it annexed into Waxhaw. Well, it's our fix now, $30,000.
And you know, there's a galvanized culvert over there on Waxhaw Parkway, too.
Well, we're
What happened to those?
hoping to see that, so I'm trying to move through this pretty quick. But Todd's catching a lot of this via putting the camera in the pipe and catching a lot of it that way, which is awesome that we have that resource, that knowledge to do it. A lot of these problems are very correct.